listeners, to the BizBlend podcast where business meets real life. I'm your host, Sana, and today's guest is Paul H. Flowers Jr. He is an entrepreneur, a national sales director, and also a powerhouse of leadership and legacy building. And we are diving into mindset, managing teams, and how Paul balances empire building with family life. So, this is going to be a really very interesting conversation. So, let's quickly get into it. So, Paul, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Sana. It is a pleasure to be here. Glad to be happy, healthy, and able to have this conversation on today.
Absolutely, absolutely. What a warm beginning to this conversation. So, Paul, I mean, you have built multiple businesses, you have led big teams, national sales teams. So, I'm so curious to know what kind of mindset shifts were most critical for you when you stepped into the true entrepreneurial leadership.
So, to properly respond to this one, I think I'll go back to go forward. Full disclosure, I've been a student of personal development. I've had mentors in and around my life in the direct sales industry, which is how I got introduced to entrepreneurship primarily in the more adult sense. Like, yes, I used to cut grass and sell basketball cards and CDs and stuff as a youth. But in this instance, where we've got people making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, it requires something different of you. So I'd gotten a love for reading reestablished in my early 20s. That was one of the main things that has stuck with me today. The phrase readers are leaders. With that, from the early days of entrepreneurship, where again, I still balanced being in school at the time, still having two or three part time positions when I was in college, Toastmasters organization where I learned to have more effective communication as opposed to just talking. I learned to actually speak. And I'd also picked up a couple more things. One was neurolinguistic programming. Again, in that being able to communicate more effectively, it's helpful to use words in a way that most resonate with other people, thus the study of NLP. Last but not least, there was a program that I had attended called the Landmark Forum through Landmark Education. It's a worldwide organization. So I believe they rebranded to Landmark Worldwide. Nevertheless, those early steps are what helped me to build the confidence, belief, and overall attitude that someone like me could do something like this. So now, when we talk about mindset of the entrepreneur, it started off with the mindset of a leader, a mindset of uh, being the person that can do the thing and that it was my responsibility to do the thing. So I'd first exercised this, yes, in direct sales again while I was in college, but then I'd also transitioned into corporate America right before having, or right after, I should say, having my first son. With that, it was a whole world of different conversations that went on because in the direct sales world, it's mostly positive. Yes, there's negative things that'll come up, but it's mostly positive. The meetings, the people that you're working with, your sideline leaders, it's typically positive interactions. Moving into corporate America, it was toxic. And I know that's not every company, Sana, in the corporate space. It just happens to be that it was several of the ones that I had worked with where the emphasis of profit over people seemed to be consistent. And people would get laid off just because of the company expanded too quickly or disciplined for not having high enough sales numbers, which in a sales organization, that's understandable. And
Yeah.
there's also something to be said of the coaching, teaching, and training to really bring a person up, right? To uplift them versus just to push them straight out. So a lot of the mindset that it took for me to succeed in the entrepreneurial venture came from being what's considered an intrapreneur inside of someone else's organization as a corporate employee. Specifically, I would just use the last 10, 11 years where I started in direct to consumer health insurance over the phone. First, it was one state with one company. I did amazingly well. Again, I came in, there was an attitude within that organization that you don't want to go too high because people will start wondering how you're doing so well. And you don't want to float too low because then, of course, you're at risk of losing your position. You should just kind of hover right in the middle. Now, think about this, listeners. If any one of you are in any capacity selling a thing, a widget, a service, whatever the case may be, why would you want to float in the middle? Why would you aim for average, right? That didn't even compute for me. But of course, out of respect, which I also again got in that direct sales capacity, even if you don't agree with something, understand the entirety of the situation. Again, this is the manager talking. I'm coming in brand new. It's a new venture for me, all those things. So listen and learn what that culture is. And to a degree, one must operate inside the culture. Now, in the sales capacity, I just blew them out of the water. The company sales goal was 35%, and I ended up that first AEP open enrollment season at 84.6% in total conversion and being number 3 in total sales out of like 100 and some odd people. And that, again, confidence booster was something that let me know, hey, I know what I'm doing. So, again, I'll continue to answer that question in multiple examples where the mindset of an entrepreneur does come from having some sort of early success. Now, it's not to say that everything you do will be a success, but there are little things that you'll succeed at along the way. And every one of those little successes deserves celebration so that as the bigger successes come, you're ready to celebrate those as well. Reason I say that is somebody might have a big win. And then if you're not used to celebrating those wins along the way, that one big win begins to make you feel like an imposter. Like, was it really me that did this? Or am I really able? Or was this just a fluke? As opposed to a person that's been celebrating along the way that says, no, I've been consistently succeeding. I've been consistently doing the right thing. I've been consistently hitting the marks and celebrating oneself because of that. It adds to the ability to receive that bigger blessing once you continue to do whatever it is again you're working on. So that mindset in terms of early entrepreneurship, I would say to sum it up in a few things. One, take responsibility for your outcome and take responsibility from your outcome. Whatever the outcome is, it's something you created. Now, saying that to say, of course, if someone says no, you can't make them say yes, right? And you want to look at what ways in which you're communicating the message that could be altered or increased in order to provide more value to that person, to better understand their point of view, to better align yourselves with them so that you can get the yes, right? So, number one, take responsibility for the outcome. Number two, I'd say take responsibility for the input, right? The input. And now I probably should have flipped those around, but we'll just keep rolling with it. But the input is what you're putting into you, because what you put into you in the dark is what comes out in the light. So if you're consistently spending time with friends and hanging out and just drinking and talking about your woes, well, when it's game time, what are you going to do? You think you'll perform at your absolute best, or will you have some of that hesitancy, procrastination, imposter syndrome, or all those things? So you definitely want to take responsibility for the input. And thirdly, and I'll just leave it with three, celebrate the successes along the way. If you are new to entrepreneurship and starting a new business venture, If you got the outline together for what you need to start your business, celebrate that. Now, by celebrate, I don't mean go out and throw a wild party and spend all this money and go, lose your consciousness from drugs and alcohol type of thing. Just give yourself a hey, congratulations, you did it, right? Have a circle of people that know that you're taking these steps so they can let you know, hey, you did this thing. Good. Now, what's the next step, right? What's the next step? So again, a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question about the mindset of the entrepreneurship journey. But in short, again, starting out, I'd say own the outcomes, own the
Yeah,
input, and make sure you celebrate every little success along the way.
absolutely. Really practical and hard hitting shifts, and I so much connect with what you said. What you put in yourself in the dark comes out in the light. That is so so good. I'm going to take away this, Paul. And also, when you mentioned about, especially in the corporate scenario, I mean, yeah, it's not everywhere, but personal with my personal experiences as well, and that too in sales, I can really say that it becomes so hard sometimes. Sometimes people say that keep your professional and personal life completely separate. But when your personal life could be in turmoil, it is going to somehow affect your work. It is going to. And with my experience also, I tried I tried so many times to hold myself, to uplift myself, when I was not performing, I was not meeting my numbers or achieving my target. But, it was like, the situation was completely opposite, not favorable. People were not having that trust in me. In fact, I was not having that belief in myself. So,
Mm.
yeah, it kind of, got me into a completely different state of mind. But then once again, I don't know, but somehow I composed myself. I promised not to give up
Good.
because mentally it was such a difficult time, Paul. And that too, it was like at the time of, just after the COVID,
Mhm.
when we were seeing mass layoffs and, companies restructuring back to office and all that stuff. So, yeah, sometimes it can be really difficult, but that's where those learnings and those inputs and the outputs, they matter. They shape your entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now I'll say a little something right now that I've actually not said in front of any other audience on neither my show nor any of the podcasts to which I've been a guest. It's just a little sneak peek preview, and I'll say it without. It's not a pitch. Don't want to sell any wares here at this point, but skill sets are imperative in any area of growth, and I'll soon be coming out with a course as well as another book on 12 specific skills that if you work on and develop those skills throughout really your lifetime, even when that next pandemic hits, even when that next thing happens that is entirely outside of your control, those skill sets, when you hone in on, work on, and grow them over time, it'll almost make it like that other stuff doesn't matter. Right? And I don't want to be insensitive towards world and economic tragedies that can come up. And when it comes to your own personal economy, when you have the right skill sets, knowledge, know how, communication abilities, network, right? Those things again all make a difference. Some of that other stuff just doesn't impact you the same way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are not never too old or successful or accomplished to learn. You
Exactly.
know, we just find the right opportunity from wherever we can learn, whether it's through reading books or connecting with people who have been there, done that, or anyone, and getting inspired and learning from them how they did that and how I can do that. I
That's
think
it.
that has to be there. That has to be there, especially right now in these uncertain times.
That's it.
Oh,
That's it.
great, great, Paul. Okay, so um, when managing large teams, that too, in high pressure industries, Paul. How do you keep the morale high? How do you ensure that, the leadership vision gets translated on the ground? Because with large teams, there will be so many opinions, so many viewpoints, there will be conflicts, there will be to and fro's, misunderstandings. How do you embrace all that as a
Uh,
team lead?
well, there's a few areas that I'll touch on here. And one of the first ones piggybacks on what we just discussed a few moments
Mhm.
ago. What you put into you is what will come out of you. What you put inside of you in the dark is what's going to come out in the light. And consequently, the people that you lead are people too, right? They're people too. So if it works for you by logic and design, it will work for them. So as the leader, not only do you need to have certain things that you put into yourself in the dark so that they come out in the light, but also that in the light, you put things into your students, into your pupils, into your sales team and organization, such that it not just sits there during the day, but that it's something that when you do this correctly, resonates with them throughout their night also. It repeats with them through their nights also. For example, a common practice that I would have when I was working in direct to consumer health insurance sales was that when I would be assigned a new team or new team members would come on board, I would take them
Mhm.
out to lunch. Company didn't pay for it, so this was 100% on my own dime. But more specifically, not only would I take them out to lunch or just treat them to lunch, it would be away from the company so that we could connect as people, not a manager and a trainee or anything like that. What tended to happen from there is that they would be more open with me about the things, like you'd mentioned, were going on in their personal lives. So now that they're open and communicating what's going on in their personal lives, I have an open window into the rest of their world. And when I understand the rest of their world, I better understand how to speak with them on the job, but also what types of
Mhm.
things that I can recommend to help them off the job. And that's what I mean when I say that what you can speak to them or into them that'll resonate throughout their evening after the 9 to 5 shift has ended, again, is a lot in part on how you begin that relationship. And each one of those times, from a leadership perspective, I would begin those relationships with an off premise lunch, typically starting them off with the understanding that I see you as, again, a human, another one of God's creations. And I see me in you, and I see you in me, and I see us really as one. So let's operate on that level and not this hierarchy and not this corporate mess and be people first. And once we're established as people, now, the movement and the energy and the positivity can really flow to and through whatever it is that we need to accomplish. Um, so that's the micro part of it.
Mhm.
Now, in leading organizations, my smallest team, I'll say, is always one, right? So I really focus on leading that one, which would be myself. And so you look in the mirror, and if you can't lead that team, then leadership may not be for you, right? For any of the listeners out there, if you can't lead that team in the mirror, then leadership might not be your shtick, right? But if you can begin to even fathom that you are the one that's leading that being you see when you look in the mirror, now we can lead another and another and another. I think my smallest team was somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 or 6. And the largest teams where I had sole responsibility over between 75 and 90. Again, just myself. Now, much of that was in a training capacity. So it was a short term duration that I'd be responsible for their onboarding, uh, understanding the metrics, understanding the scripts, learning those initial sales tactics and techniques, and ultimately closing deals. And that we did phenomenally well, which is why they brought me from management to training for the company. Then I did that also in a contract organization where I was training in a slightly different capacity. I trained over 1,000 people to get their life and health insurance licenses here in the States. And that the result there was a little different because it wasn't necessarily a sale from a dollar and value perspective for numbers for the company. But what
Mhm,
was measured and looked at was the pass rate. So the traditional pass rate was somewhere between 60 and 70%. And I
mhm.
was excited that over 90% of my students were passing the test on the first go round,
Wow.
right? So it wasn't
Mhm,
just the ability to communicate and be a good person and a human in that setting. And this was all done virtually, mind you. So that with the advent of COVID, again, brought in another not barrier, opportunity to grow and the ability to do this type of thing in a
yeah.
virtual platform. Whereas everybody can't present on screen. And again, that's not everyone's stick, and for those that, will have the camera at some funky angle and be looking at their belly button and just there's something to it, and I'm not saying that so not to say that I'm special or great in any way, sort of, any sort of way. A gentleman did tell me, though, that it is a sad dog that doesn't wag its own tail, so it is something that I do with a certain degree of excellence and expertise, and I'm saying that it's because of what I mentioned before. I put things into me by way of the reading. I practiced speaking and effectively communicating, which was Toastmasters. And I went through the Landmark Forum, which is a 3 day and an evening course that has, again, over a 90+% satisfaction rating that helped me get a lot of the mental and psychological blocks out of the way. Again, I don't get any toasters or cookies or kudos if anybody does any of these things, Toastmasters or Landmark. These are just things that mentors in my life introduced to me, and I'd use them, and here we are. Here we are today. So I think that about answers the question on managing those teams from both the micro to some of the macro.
Yeah, yeah, that wonderfully makes sense. And one thing when you were mentioning that, especially during the COVID, it was kind of a barrier, but then you jumped to an opportunity. I think sometimes all these barriers and challenges, they kind of, um, dress themselves as opportunities. So
Mm,
we have the right mindset and the perspective, then we can identify those challenges or blockers as the right opportunities. So yeah, I kind of, I thought, okay, this is something which I myself can connect with.
absolutely.
Hmm. Okay, so Paul, before we wrap up, I think this has to be talked about. You are deeply committed to your family. I know that, from our last podcast as well. Even when you are scaling multiple ventures. So, what are your non-negotiables when it comes to balancing business growth and family life? Do you think we can have that balance as an entrepreneur, or is it something rare or unique?
I will paraphrase a gentleman whom I respect by the name of Myron Golden, who discussed this very same topic and very much aligns with my own beliefs, where
Mhm.
you have focus and then balance. And what happens is when you're really focused on something, there's going to be imbalance somewhere, right? Somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, the degree of that imbalance is going to be determined by the degree in which, or the stage in which you are in your venture. So in the entrepreneurial stage, when you're just now starting something out, you need a tremendous amount of focus, right? A tremendous amount of focus. And there might only be a little bit of balance, right? Because you're doing well, not eight, excuse me, 10, 12, 14-hour days. So there are some things that might fall by the wayside, which again, in our previous conversation, we talked along the lines of having the right partner in your life, right? The right actual support system and people that are in alignment from day one, not somebody that you've got to consistently proverbially beat over the head to let them know your vision as to why you need the children to be quiet, or somebody you've got to consistently drag along the way in order to help to do the thing that either you're doing and they said that they would help, or that they're doing and you want to help them to do it and you got to drag them to do it or you got to consistently fight negative attitudes or behaviors. Like none of that stuff is appropriate or acceptable in any partnership or agreement that is between any number of people that say they want a common thing. So noting that when you have the when you do have a family around, it's really important for them to have a clear understanding that, hey, dad needs this amount of time, mom needs this amount of time to do X, Y, and Z. And we're gonna do this in this way for a set duration of time. And then at the end of that, there's going to be, like they say, the light at the end of the tunnel or the end of the proverbial rainbow. So it might be 90 days at a time that dad's only able to spend, or excuse me, mom's only able to spend 2 hours a day of just fun time. All right. Half an hour here, half an hour there, hour here, 2 hours a day on the weekend straight, 4 hour blocks on Sundays type of thing. It might go like that for 30, 60, 90 days. But guess what? At the end of that 90 days, we're going on a cruise because I know that when I give the focus and do the correct activities in this realm, that the results will come out in this realm. So that's the early stage, a lot of focus, right? It might be a little bit of balance in some areas. So you might not spend 8 hours a day with family, 8 hours a day working, 8 hours a day sleeping. No, and you might spend 2 hours a day with family, 12 hours a day working, 6 hours a day sleeping. And then whatever the other balance of that is, right? From feeding some faith, some reflection, that type of thing. But as
Mm,
you grow in the stages of your entrepreneurial endeavor, that's when that focus can lessen a bit. So it might not require a 14-hour day. It'll
mm,
get down to 8 at some point. And now we've got more balance in other areas. It might get down to 6 and then 4. And for some people, just 2 hours a day is all they need. Again, after they get to a stage, and this is where many people come into entrepreneurship thinking that they can work 2 and 4 hour days and 6 hour days in the beginning and wonder why there's no success. Wonder why the first deal hasn't closed or they haven't gotten that first client or whatever the case may be. Well, hell, you just got started, right? You're just getting started, and don't be a month or 2 or 3 months in, 4 months in, and still thinking that a 2 hour day of extreme focus on the income producing activities specifically is going to be enough, right? Not for someone getting started that wants to do that for themselves. Sure, if you're just working contract and you've got an endless supply of income and things of that nature, if you want to start a new endeavor and get it off the ground whenever, right? Yeah, okay, sure, work 2 to 4 hours a day. But most people I know that step into entrepreneurship, that's not the case. So there has to be a reasonable understanding of the work that's required to get this thing off the ground. So you'll again have those conversations with family, friends, colleagues, former coworkers, whomever, that this is the time that I'm doing this. It's also important to block out time for some things also. And again, as to not have a total neglecting of various areas of your life, I may only be able to get in 35 minutes of exercise today, an hour and a half family time today. And the rest of that time is between sleeping, traveling, and working on this vision. Put it in the calendar, put a spot for it, and commit to it. Now, will things happen and you might need to make a change? Absolutely. That's life. And give yourself grace and get back to that schedule because the things that we scheduled are the things that we see. And that's how things ultimately will come to fruition. Your goals will come ultimately to fruition. When we have a plan, we schedule them out, and we understand there's going to be imbalance at first as we focus on really getting it off the ground. They say that a rocket ship requires basically a football field worth of fuel, right? That's
yeah,
a big
right,
field, a
yeah,
football field worth of fuel, X number of feet high in order just to get it off the ground. But once it's off the ground, breaks through that level, that layer of the atmosphere, it requires little puffs,
yeah.
right, to help it move throughout space. So We've got to understand that imbalance at the beginning is like that rocket fuel that's needed to get these ventures off the ground. Act as such, schedule and plan accordingly, and ultimately, we'll all have our break through the atmosphere moment where we only need just little puffs to keep going like the rocket ship.
That is such a good example. Lovely, lovely, Paul. That was really beautifully put. Really beautifully put. And
Thank you.
before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you, especially those who are already into the waters of entrepreneurship or they are beginning to step into it, what's the best way to do that?
I'd go to www.paul.health. That's the easiest way. It has my links and things there, my link tree, my podcast, all that stuff is there. Alternatively, if you just open up a Google page and type my name in, Paul H. Flowers Jr., the first page should be all me. And again, not saying that braggadociously speaking, it's saying that there's a reason I use my middle name and suffix, that is to differentiate myself and also share myself with others, where there's some story again behind that we'll have, I'm sure, on another podcast. And with that, the last note or tip or tidbit I'll give is that of personal branding, where
Yes.
initially I thought to brand my company my company. Now you realize that I've not mentioned the name of either one of my companies in this entire conversation, because
Exactly.
as important as they are, again, Sana, your and I's connection is more important than any of the business. And if the personal brand's not there, the business doesn't matter anyway, as I've learned. So that'll be my tidbit to leave with the listeners. Brand yourself personally, find a way to distinctly make sure that you're differentiated from others. In my instance, it's using my full name, which I mentioned that it really, really works well. So from there, find me on again YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I'm just getting into Twitter and TikTok, so you may not see a whole lot of posts there, but everything's basically a wide open book. Please connect with me on all platforms.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'll make sure to have all the links and details in the show notes. And Paul, I mean, this is such an inspiring, it's just a soulful conversation because yeah, I mean, we get resources, we have so much to study and learn from, but I think through stories and personal moments, it's more and more evident, and I think it's the best way to learn from each other. So thank you so much for this conversation. And listeners, that's a wrap on today's episode with Paul H. Flowers Jr. His wisdom on leadership, family, and legacy truly hits home, for me at least. And I'm very sure for all of you listeners. So don't forget to connect with Paul, refer to the show notes along with this episode, and stay tuned to BizBlend for more such incredible, raw, actionable conversations for transformative business insights right here. Thank you.